1942, the Battle of the Coral Sea. I was just a kid in junior high when I read those figures. They stuck with me. And I'll never forget Midway. For every pilot we lost, we got 5 enemy. You see, it was a personal thing with me. My older brother, Ted, helped fight this battle. Marianne Turkey Shoot. Our carrier pilots whipped the Japs to a standstill, and Ted got 9 of them before they got him. Then came Okinawa. Another year of school, and I could get even for Ted. That's what I thought. But the Navy's carriers had broken Japan's back, and yet those box scores would always needle me. And in college, years after VJ Day, I still remember it. 2 other guys felt the same way I did. The rest is simple. The 3 of us went Navy Air. It was Pensacola, here we are. This is where the Navy's air arm first developed its muscle. And it didn't take long to find how it's done. No wasted time and plenty of hard work. We were already in class and hard at it within a few hours after we arrived and checked in at this Annapolis of the Air. There was me, Phillips, and my 2 buddies from college, Tony Mettes, easygoing, level-headed, and Skip Krangle, a little on the cocky side, but a likable guy. We were told right from the start that the Navy realizes that this training course must give as much as it demands, and it does. But a lot depends on the attitude of the students. So, here we were, all of us at the bottom rung of a rough, tough ladder of study and physical conditioning. The Greeks had a word for it, a strong mind and a strong body. And today in naval pre-flight training, things haven't changed a bit. But a lot of it was more sport than work. And later on, we discovered just why the Naval Air Training Command put so much emphasis on the physical side of the flight training syllabus. An essential of modern flying, it speeds up to and exceeding that of sound, demands a body that can really take it. Military training is also an integral part of the physical program, and so is swimming. When a man does most of his flying over water, it sort of helps to know how, just in case. Navy regs are a must for all students at Pensacola. Many of the traditions and customs of the United States Navy have sprung directly from these regulations, some of which are as old as our country. A few of them can even be attributed to John Paul Jones himself. Everything that airplanes are made of must become second nature to a future Navy pilot. Flying is the same as any other business. You don't know what you should know. How can you tell anyone else if something's wrong? So we study motors, from the gas engine job to the newest and finest of jet-propelled engines that'll pick you up and get you there faster than man has ever traveled before. When you have the throttle to this baby in your hand, you're there before you even get a chance to get started. Not too long ago, weather was a tough problem for pilots to cope with. But today, through the science of aerology, we're taught how to meet this problem, study it, interpret it, and beat it. Long before the real thing, takeoffs and landings are made with a 12BK trainer, which accurately simulates flying with the student in control. Other ingenious devices familiarize the Navy's flight students with the tools of their trade. The elaborate cycloramic link trainer faithfully reproduces the conditions and problems of actual flight maneuvers. And the celestial link trainer develops the student's aptitude for night flying, all of us taking turns at overcoming posed problems in the art of pinpointed navigation. Our instructor took plenty of time with us on the motor test stand, and there was opportunity to study in close-ups the SNJ motor and its instrument panel functioning alongside. Between practical training, outdoor activities, and classroom studies, these were busy, busy days for both instructors and students. There was intensive navigational work with octants and sextants, and by now I thought I was pretty handy at plotting a position. That's what I thought, but my instructor thought otherwise. He told me there's much more to a sextant than ordinarily meets the eye. In the Survival Museum, we found out that crash landing techniques and procedures are a highly developed science in themselves. Emergency equipment provided United States Navy pilots is the best in the world. Learn how to use it and follow standard operational procedures, and you'll know how to land and live on everything from an Arctic glacier to a tropical jungle. We also studied what native plants can be used for food, and of course we found out some can't. Take the sand, the sun, the surf, and a pretty girl, throw in a hot dog and a Coke, stir lightly, and you have something hard to beat. My only mistake was picking this particular day to go swimming. For the next morning, I met the famous Filbert Dunker, with its perfect facsimile of a crash landing at sea and a practical lesson in how to combat the hazards involved. A naval pilot is a valuable man, and no time or expense is spared by the Navy in training each individual student in survival techniques which will stand him in good stead, come what may. This rubber raft isn't exactly a yacht, but in a pinch it'd come in mighty handy. A sense of touch also comes in mighty handy. A man is required to know his instrument panel and cockpit controls forwards, backwards, inside out, upside down, and even blindfolded. We were getting closer to actual flying by now, and we were taught how to taxi without nosing over and putting a crimp in the prop. In this particular ground control trainer, I found out just how much brake pressure it took to throw your nose forward and down. This practice also placed special emphasis on ground safety regulations. In line with the Naval Air Training Command's policy of precaution against every emergency, each flight student is checked out in the bailout trainer. You're allowed 3 seconds to snap that hatch back and get clear. If a man fails in any of these pre-flight tests, it might ground him, or even wash him out. Just when I'd about given up hope of ever really flying, came the day. After pre-flight briefing at the hangar, the order sounded for instructors and students to man their planes. The personnel carrier took us down to the flight line for our first taste of airborne training. It was a mighty big moment. My instructor was a Navy combat veteran. This was all old stuff to him, but big news to me. He looked me over like a mother hen. He checked my chute harness and safety belts thoroughly before ever getting in the ship himself. We were both hooked up on an intercommunicating phone system, and here's where a flight student begins to feel like an expectant father. And you can take my word for it when I say the Navy's new streamlined flight program is something to get excited about. It starts with this pre-solo dual instruction stage. And until I had the feel of my SNJ in my fingertips, in my eyes, in my ears, and yes, even in the seat of my pants, I listened to plenty of instruction and advice on that intercom. As the tempo of instruction picked up, according to my individual capabilities, my instructor directed every effort toward having me flying the airplane alone. A flight student is usually in complete control of his ship at the end of his 10th dual hop. From the very beginning, plenty of stress was put upon a fine technique of smoothness and accuracy in flying that enables a naval aviator to execute the precision maneuvers necessary to landing aboard an aircraft carrier, as well as outfight any opponent he might meet later on in the air. Now came the day a pilot will never forget. It was the day of my 19th dual flight. I didn't think that psychology had anything to do with flying, but an instructor knows it. And to lessen those waiting for the big moment jitters, you never know until it happens that today is the day you solo. A few last-minute instructions, and I was ready to go back up alone. The kick of a lifetime, and a gulp as part of the course. I've never seen anything emptier than that rear cockpit, but it felt good, real good. I went upstairs so fast that it sort of took my breath. Then my airplane seemed to relax a little, and I guess I did too. Because to me, those Navy wings of gold were right around the next cloud. But soloing was just a springboard into the rough going still ahead of us. Now, we had further training in instrument and navigational hops, flying radio beams, and as usual, Skip would rather be flying with the waves instead of over them. We were back in trainers and taught correct voice procedures and the technique of radio control maneuvers. Tony seemed to get the hang of it right from the start. Others of us had to work a little harder. Me, for instance. But I knew if I could pass this exercise okay in the trainer, I'd be all right when I put it to use in actual flight. An instructor notes every deviation of course on his plotting table, and usually 2 or 3 students kibitz the movement of the crab as it traces the perfectly simulated flight pattern. Instructions are called in to the student to change compass headings and come in for an instrument landing approach, a maneuver that demands split-second timing and coordination. Skip made a big mistake here. He believed it was all a cinch. But he learned Pensacola requires more than a hot-shot approach to flying. A man must study and concentrate. And our instructor knew what was going on every second inside that hatch. Skip thought you'd just fly 3 sides of a triangle and set her down. He set down all right, but in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. His flight chart in the cockpit showed him how wrong he was. So he had to do it all over again. That night, Tony and I both told Skip he'd better start bearing down. But he just laughed it off. What's funny to a flight student isn't funny to the training command. The foundation of this new training system is the careful integration of ground checks with aerial practice. And training in instrument flying is as important as any other single thing. Everything I learned in the link trainer now paid off in the air. Finally came the flying. I'd been waiting for acrobatics, and here is where precision really counts. There were slow rolls, loops, snap rolls, precision spins, immelman turns, everything in the book. These maneuvers weren't just for fun. They're a definite part of the training syllabus. For only through mastering these aerial capers can we cope with any flight situation that presents itself later on. Next, there was a type of flying that's the backbone of the carrier task force. Formation flying that spells teamwork. Even taxiing together. We fishtail to keep an eye out for our buddies. By now, every man knows his SNJ like a member of his own family. Both pilot and plane had a mutual regard and deep respect for one another. In the air, we practiced every type of echelon join-up until we had them down so pat it looked like we were all wired together. This is really teamwork. We all knew what our next training step was and could hardly wait for a crack at it. Gunnery. And fixed gunnery demands a total combination of the skills we had learned. The pilot's weapon is the whole airplane. To point it properly on the tow target requires an accurate estimate of range and angle of deflection for timing the exact instant to press the firing button. This is close enough to the real thing to make a man all business. Peeling off for a firing run, an old saying popped into my mind, get or get got. None of us fooled around here. We meant it, all of us. Later, on the ground, we tallied up our scores. Each pilot's gun fires a distinctive color of bullet, so we know the exact score of each man And in this particular instance, no one was ashamed of his marksmanship. Least of all, Tony. If that tow target had been an enemy plane, Tony would have been on his way to being a Navy ace. With a taste of gunnery under our belts, our instructors followed up with a concentrated course in the finer points of fighter tactics. Navy fighter tactics that had proven themselves all the way from the Coral Sea to Japan itself. And now I knew the reason for the terrific scores rolled up by Navy pilots in combat. I'd found the answers to the figures that had needled me for years. Training films played their part in driving home important points. We could visually analyze the correct and incorrect techniques of fighter tactics. These were lessons that helped us become more expert defensively and more effective offensively. The flight course designed by the Naval Air Training Command is fair but tough. Some of the men are bound to wash out. There's different reasons for it. Goofing off is one of them. Skip did it once too often, and it caught up with him. He was told that to maintain the high standards of naval aviation, a man must go to the fleet knowing his job, and knowing that he knows it. Skip just hadn't measured up. And as badly as we felt about it, we all knew that a weak link in a chain of teamwork could cost an innocent man's life. The closer we came to graduating from basic training, the harder we worked. We were familiarized with carrier landing procedures, and we met the paddle watch, so called from the paddles used by the carrier landing signal officer to direct the pilot's approach. Any fault in approach technique, no flaps too high or too low, wheels up or a warning that the flight deck isn't clear, brings a wave off. I was given the order to cut and land, and this was followed a few days later by another order. An order to report to advanced training at the Naval Air Station at Corpus Christi, Texas. I still didn't know which thought was uppermost in my mind, the pride of graduating from basic training or the anticipation of the kicks ahead in advance. Anyway, it was so long, Pensacola, and hello, Corpus Christi.